Malcolm, always great to see you, my friend. Looking sharp as usual. Lots to talk about, not a lot of time. I got to jump right into it. Obviously, the Israel-Hamas ceasefire. Incredibly big news, something that your background is so relevant in terms of providing my listeners with the information that they need. My question to you is, how sustainable do you think that the recent ceasefire between Israel and Hamas will be, given the deep-rooted hostilities that have gone on for, I don't even know how many hundreds, thousands of years? And what conditions are necessary to ensure lasting peace?
Well, let's hope that this actually happens. I mean, the Biden administration with Netanyahu, Qatar, Egypt, and in the end, Hamas, who are the antagonists here, finally got to the point where they could have a commendable period of time where there will be a ceasefire, and that's going to be 6 weeks. Now, can it hold? That's the key question. Any one of these stakeholders can blow this up, particularly literally Hamas, which is a terrorist group. And it is not in their interest to, unless there's an enormous amount of pressure, it's not in their interest to ensure that Israel gets a victory out of this. They need to make it appear that they are getting a victory. Israel, of course, is making some very, very big concessions. 1,000 Hamas members or people who were suspected of being Hamas members or who were captured on suspicion of activities during the Gaza war operation Iron Swords will be released. Some other Hamasiyun who were held by Israel in prisons, including some murderers, will also be released. Now, as I understand it, they're going to get at least 33 prisoners, the details of which are still being worked out. As many as 23 of them are supposedly alive and in some, at least ambulatory condition. Again, with Hamas, you don't know. They're a terrorist organization. They lie. And they also, as we found out last year, they don't actually control every one of the hostages. We found that Palestinian Islamic Jihad had some. We found that civilians had gone over there and had taken control of the corpses of many people who were killed in the kibbutzim along the border. And whether they're actually recoverable or not is a very, very big question. So, it's amazing that it took 15 months. We got to this point. This will be, by the way, the second ceasefire. For those of you who may have forgotten, last year at around the 2.5 month mark, Netanyahu, Biden, and Hamas got a ceasefire that held for a short period of time, and then the fighting resumed, and it has never stopped. And that's a key point to remember. Hamas still has combat capability. They're building new terrorists from some of the survivors, and they are still fighting Israel in this little piecemeal war, which has brought immense death and devastation onto their own people. So if this holds and we get this deal, it'll be an incredible achievement. But Hamas, we have to make sure that Hamas lives up to its side of the deal and that this doesn't look like a capitulation by Israel.
Yeah, I get that. Go through what it is that we actually do know, because you're right. So much of the information as it relates to the swap is unknown. But we do know that there's approximately 100 hostages that are remaining, live or deceased. So the question is, 1,000 for 33? I mean, I'm just not 100% sure that I fully understand
Well, you have
where
to.
where this all came from.
Mm.
And while Joe Biden talks about it, we're going to get to that after. I would like to hear from somebody that knows intimately this area, how something like that is even brought up and initially just taken seriously, which when I first heard that there's 1,000 Hamas fighters or sympathizers that are going to be released for 33, I actually had to rewind the television in order to hear it again because I thought I misheard. Give me your impression.
Well, you have to understand there's a principle that was established by the Israelis when they had the release of the Israeli shoulder, Shalit, uh, about 10 years ago, in which they turned over thousands of people in Israel's jails to return one fighter. One of those people that was returned, all right, was the commander of Hamas who carried out the 7 October attacks. So that principle of numbers, one, it eases the prison population that the Israeli army has to hold. Two, Hamas's terrain, the entirety of the Gaza Strip is devastated. Three, most of the true combatants, the real fighters, are literally dead. Many of these people are just suspects or were just in the areas in Gaza that
Hmm.
the Israelis swept up. So they may not actually have any value other than sending them home and seeing what happens there. But as you know, the concept of one drop of blood for an Israeli versus, to return that person and to get them to their family, the pressure on the Netanyahu government by the families of the hostages has been immense. When I was in Israel last year, there were massive protests in Tel Aviv, down at Hostage Square in the Ministry of Defense, to the point of riots. And where Netanyahu had to use force to disband hostage families. So,
Yeah.
the emotion and the intensity of the political pressure that's also on the government to show something, to show that they're doing more than just killing Hamas fighters, but to actively get back Israeli citizens, including the 7 American citizens who were held hostage or who may have, passed away and their body needs to be returned to the United States. This is an enormous political pressure, but it is also an enormous political win. My personal opinion on this is that when Israel passed the 1 year mark, Netanyahu could do, if he survived fighting for 1 year, this terrorist organization, and not getting the hostages back, then at that point he can negotiate anything. Because if he could have survived that politically, and he did, then he can move forward to having active negotiations. Some of the things we do know: the hostage swap is going to be facilitated by Egypt and Qatar. This also includes allowing wounded Palestinians to cross through the Rafah crossing, which Israel now controls. It is no longer under, UNRWA control or the United Nations control or Hamas's control. So every individual that crosses from Israel over to Egypt is going to be a known entity. They're going to have biometrics on this individual. They will not be allowed to return unless some future deal is cut. This includes, as I understand it, 50 wounded Hamas fighters per day that were wounded before the ceasefire. So they have hundreds and hundreds of Hamas fighters who have lost limbs, who have suffered major casualty, and for humanitarian purposes are going to remove them from the battlefield to where they can't recover and can't return. That is a concession that Israel made that appears to work well throughout the Muslim world. Now, will that be seen as a massive victory for Hamas that their fighters are being evacuated, a la Yasser Arafat's evacuation from, from the region to Tunisia way back when? No, it doesn't include the leadership. The leadership is dead. And most of these concessions are being made by a very surviving junior leaders through their leadership who, are operating out of Turkey and Iran and their negotiators in Egypt. But again, anything that stops the fighting for 6 weeks is going to allow a massive return of personnel. They're going to have security contractors from a third party country who are supposed to clear all the people from the north who can return to the south, people from the south who can return to the north, and try to pick up the remains of their lives. This also, and if you want to be cynical about it, will give Israel a lot of intelligence. People are going to need mobile phones. which is the only way they're going to communicate. People are going to be putting out their own videos, which yields up an enormous amount of intelligence. People are going to be complaining not just about Israel, but about what Hamas did to them and who is surviving. So, all of this works out. It certainly works out for the Palestinian people. You have 2.1 million people who need to
Hmm.
return home, who need to have some semblance of their lives restored to them. Gaza is devastated. When I was there, you could see the devastation, but that's because Hamas fought every 100 meters against Israel, and every building in between was hit, struck, shot through, destroyed, had tunnels under it. So they need to also establish a political movement to restore them back to a humanitarian level of support and to get them past Hamas as a leadership body.
Understood. So, look, let me ask you this, because with the return of these 33 hostages, and my understanding is that it's to take place in a day or so, what does this signal about the effectiveness of international negotiations? I mean, how might the process for securing the release of all hostages ultimately evolve?
Well, we have to admit this. The Biden administration has kept up constant pressure on all the players and has been neck deep in the negotiation since the last ceasefire. Again, there were 7 American citizens involved in there. We could have just said, hey, we'll just take the 7 American citizens, and Hamas would have probably cut that deal. To the tune of withholding Israel citizens and citizens from other countries. But we're going to get back 33 hostages and the remains of them, 2/3 of which, 23, I believe, are supposed to come back alive, and then they're going to have the remains of 10 other hostages returned to them. Now, Egypt, of course, as the principal facilitator to this, who's going to help guarantee the foods that are going to go into Gaza, the humanitarian works that are going to go into Gaza. It takes a lot to get Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Qatar, Turkey, Hamas, and
Saudi.
Saudi Arabia and the United States all on one sheet of music. I mean, it's literally herding cats to a certain extent. But to say that you're technically negotiating 33 persons for the welfare of 2.1 million individuals. That place is going to flood with logistic support from the Gulf states, from Egypt, from Turkey, which will help ease the suffering of the Palestinian people. And I think, of course, you and I both believe that this should have been done a long time ago, if not for the obstinance of the Hamas leadership. And if it hadn't been for the death of Sinwar, you probably never would have gotten your hostages back. As you know, they murdered 7 hostages as they were about to be rescued. So it is an achievement on a diplomatic level that shows that talking talks and it
Yeah,
works.
and it does. So, look, Qatar has obviously been instrumental in mediating this deal, and we owe Qatar a true debt of gratitude. How do you see Qatar's role shifting in the future Middle East peace process? And what do you think that this means for the United States foreign policy in that region? Because I know that in Qatar we have a base, we have a very large base. Um, I know that there was a lot of fighting between Qatar and Saudi Arabia in the past. How do you see this as affecting U.S. foreign policy in that region?
Well, that remains to be seen. We'll find out next week, right? When Marco Rubio becomes the Secretary of State and he starts going around and cutting deals. Already, the Trump transition team is taking credit for the entire hostage
Yeah. Well, we're
recovery.
gonna get to that too. That's
Okay.
actually
But
my very next comment.
with regards to Qatar, look, they set themselves up, the Al Thani family there set themselves up years ago, understanding that the balance of power in the Middle East was like this. Kuwait, United Arab Emirates produce oil. United Arab Emirates produces services in terms of real estate, investment, banking, and then has now taken over Switzerland as the dark money hiding place throughout the world, right? And Qatar has decided to play a role. Let me put it this way, in a way that people can understand. He's sort of like Joel Cairo in the Maltese Falcon, right?
Sure.
He's or Ugarte, in Casablanca. He's the guy that has the way to get something people want, but they set themselves up deliberately as the middlemen of the Middle East, as the people who would have the Taliban headquarters in Doha and Hamas's headquarters in Doha and relations with Iran so that they could be the interocular for the West. And in that way, the West they could use these relationships with hostile entities as leverage to get concessions from the West, like, recognizing their awesome World Cup. That was held in 100-degree heat, and the first time allowed them to sell alcohol in the country. And people would say, "Ooh, Qatar's nice." They put U.S. Central Command forward, right? Major base in that country at the same time that Central Command on a day-to-day basis for a decade was bombing the Taliban who had offices in Qatar. So Doha set themselves up, the Qatar set themselves up to be the guy, to be the middleman. And in the Muslim world, I don't know if how much time you spend over there, but if you go to the Arab world, especially the Gulf states, they're all about the in-between, right? Being the person who was cutting the deal. And they have their own little satellite of Arab state interoculars, mainly Lebanese and Egyptians, who are the guys that get things done, who wear the suits, who drive the Maseratis, and speak Arabic, speak English, who will get the minutia of what the royal family of Qatar want done, and in such a way that the West finds it acceptable. Now, where's Saudi Arabia in this? Saudi Arabia is it's the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room, and it
Yeah,
is
they're the Mac Daddy of the Middle East.
well, they are the Mac Daddy of the Middle East. But here's a way to look at it. If I could, choose lean into popular fiction. They're sort of like there's as that 1,000-pound gorilla. They are the 1,000-pound gorilla in the George of the Jungle cartoon, where he's a 1,000-pound gorilla, but he speaks English, King's English from Oxford University, and smokes a pipe, and maintains the distinguished face of the Muslim world because they own a large piece of the world's oil. And I'm old enough to remember the oil embargo of 1973 and lines of cars that go for miles when Saudi Arabia is displeased. And since that time, appeasing them has been a big issue. And this is why Donald Trump, during his original campaign in 2016, was attacking the Muslim world. And the first place he went to was Saudi Arabia. And the Saudis suddenly realized, hey, we have an American president we can buy, much less not bribe him. We can buy this guy and bring him to our side because he recognizes money talks, and nothing talks more than oil money.
Yeah. Ain't that the truth? Especially if you're watching Landman, that basically gives you the full introspective on what's going on there. So
Right.
I want to jump in for a second and talk about the Trump administration's comments, right? Because obviously, President-elect Trump made comments whereby he claimed credit for aspects of this deal, despite the fact that President Biden has made claims that this is the same deal that's been on the table now for the past 8 months or so. How do you think that these statements affect the US credibility on the global stage, particularly when you're dealing with really super delicate, just delicate international negotiations like the lives of hostages?
Mhm. Well, I can't believe that I have to say this again for the 500th time on the Michael Cohen podcast. Look, Donald Trump's a pathological liar. No one knows better than that than the person on the other side of the screen, right? So people understand this and have factored all of this in. Donald Trump and his transition team now are creating the mythology around him. Remember, he said in December that if the hostages aren't released by January 20th, the United States is really going to wade into this. He was privy as part of the transition to understand through President Netanyahu himself, people in the State Department, there was a deal in the offing. We thought this deal would have happened in October or November, but there's a touch of, how can I put it? There's a touch of Iran hostage, chicanery going on around here. You might recall in 1979, they claimed that Ronald Reagan told the Iranians, "Don't loose the hostages until I'm president of the United States." The way that the Middle East, not the Muslim world, the Middle East operates, respects that. And I think that Trump understood that there were going to be a hostage release. Netanyahu himself was probably looking at that January 20th deadline. I understand it's going to happen on the 18th. And Trump knew that he could just come in, lie, and sweep and say that he was going to do it. This hostage deal is the same hostage deal that has been talked about, as you said, for over 8 months. Almost the exact same parameters. It's just a question, Israel needed to carry out some activities like seizing the Rafah crossing, right? And now they have the resources in place that the tunnel systems have been disassembled. People can't, rush back and forth and bring weapons in from Egypt. A lot of pieces had to fall into place for this to happen strategically and, tactically for Israel. And of course, Hamas had to keep them alive. And we had to trust Hamas had living hostages, which is probably something that Secretary Blinken, the director of CIA, the Egyptians and the Qataris probably had proof of life months ago for these hostages, and probably the negotiation being so sensitive probably kept them alive. Again, Sinwar is the one who killed the last hostages, and with him, dead in his chair, he was. It was now up to the surviving local commander to deal with Doha, Istanbul, or Doha, Ankara, Cairo, to say, to get a body and a physical count to see what would happen. What I think is great, though, is that I understood that the Hamas, they wanted the body of Yahya Sinwar as part of the negotiating platform, that his body would be removed. Of course, Israel wasn't going to do that. That body will be cremated and scattered into somewhere. But it's very important that not only Israel's going to have a triumphant day when this happens, when the hostages return, and they deserve that. But I can't see why and or how the Trump White House could claim anything other than they already knew that a hostage deal was in the offing. But as you
Well,
know, they're going to
can I
create
take a can
reality.
I take a can I take a little contrarian position on this?
Sure.
As somebody who has known Trump as long as I have, almost a decade and a half, as somebody that was around at the very beginning of the first Trump administration, the fact that he is so unknown and that he doesn't have any real ideology or structure is what makes the world nervous. Vladimir Putin is nervous. Mohammed bin Salman was nervous. The Emir Al Thani were nervous. They reached out to basically everyone that they can meet for the sole purpose of understanding Donald J. Trump. And they didn't. And I believe that when he turns around, I mean, Kim Jong un felt the heat, as did Xi Jinping. What will this crazy man, which is the way that they would describe him, what would this crazy man actually do? Will he use America's military might, our nuclear arsenal, our incredible military to go in there and just fucking destroy everything? Don't think for a second that Mohammed bin Salman or any of these Middle Eastern countries weren't concerned, like Iran, that Trump would just blow up their fucking oil fields or take them over. We heard Trump say early on in the campaign of 2016 that if Iran, as an example, who we had military forces there, if they don't behave, and if they do X, Y, and Z, he would do one of two things: either take over the oil fields using our military. Remember what he said? To the victor go the spoils. He never understood why we didn't take it years ago. Or just blow it up, which would basically throw their entire country into an economic downfall. Today's episode is brought to you by Ali. That's clean, fresh nutrition that your dog needs in 5 flavors that they're absolutely going to flip over. And you don't have to be a veterinary nutritionist to know that feeding your dog real whole foods with minimal processing, it's one of the best choices that you can make for their health. It's a perfectly portioned, whole, fresh food diet that's been proven to extend your pup's life, get a load of this, by 2.5 years. And who doesn't want to have more time with their best friend? So with absolutely no harmful fillers, no preservatives, Ali, it's made in U.S. kitchens with ingredients that are carefully sourced from trusted growers and producers around the world. And because the time between Ali's gentle cooking and your dog's chowing down is minimal, they don't need preservatives to extend shelf life. With 5 protein-first recipes like fresh beef with sweet potatoes, fresh turkey with blueberries, or fresh lamb with cranberries, you might start thinking, damn, my dog eats better than I do. And that's probably true when it comes to Ali. Okay, so here's how it works. First, you go and you fill out Ali's 30-second quiz. And what they'll do is they'll create a customized meal plan based on your pup's weight, activity level, and other health information. Ali then crunches the numbers, and then they recommend the right recipe and daily portions for your precious pup based on hundreds of thousands of real dog results. And listen to this one. You can get your starter box. This is for first timers. Ali will send you out your pup's first box with 2 weeks worth of meals and a guide on how to gradually switch them over to their new diet. So listen, you can customize this plan easily by Ali offering 3 meal plans to choose from so that you can go out and choose between a full fresh plan, fresh topper plan, or a mixed plan with their freshly baked recipes for your special fur baby. And they also have treats and supplements. And it's why I say that you should give your pup a fresh start this new year by letting them taste a personalized meal plan from Ali. So head right now to ollie.com/Cohen and tell them all about your dog. And use code Cohen to get a load of this, 60% off your first box of meals when you subscribe today. Plus, they offer a clean bowl guarantee on the first box. So if you're not completely satisfied, you'll get your money back. Again, that's ollie.com/Cohen and enter code Cohen to get 60% off your first box. Again, that's ollie.com/Cohen and enter code Cohen to get 60% off your first box. Start your dog's new year off right with Ali. I found a tool that gives me insights to create a healthy metabolism for my body. And it's managed to improve other aspects of my life as well. And it's called Lumen. So what's Lumen? Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs. And it'll give you a tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, your workouts, your sleep, and even stress management. So look, here's how Lumen works. All you have to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning. And you'll know what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. Then, Lumen gives you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. And you can also breathe into it before and after workouts and meals so that you know exactly what's going on in your body in real time. And Lumen will give you tips to keep you on top of your health game. Look, I'm not a kid anymore, and my metabolism, well, it's just not as fast as it used to be. So staying healthy and fit, it's much harder. And anything I can do to gain an advantage, well, look, I'm interested. And here's why. First, your metabolism. It's your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food that you eat into fuel that keeps you going for the day. And because your metabolism is at the center of everything that your body does, optimal metabolic health, it translates to a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, better sleep, and more. And Lumen, it gives you recommendations to improve your metabolic health. And to the women out there, it'll also help you track your cycle as well as the onset of menopause and adjust your recommendations to keep your metabolism healthy through hormonal shifts so that you too can keep your energy and stave off cravings. So look, take the next step right now to improving your health and go to lumen.me/Cohen to get 20% off your Lumen. That's LUMEN.me/Cohen for 20% off your purchase. And thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. You think that didn't play a role in this when he turned around and said to Hamas, if they're not released, because it is very particular in terms of timing, that if there's not a ceasefire and a deal made before he enters the White House, that there was going to be fire and fury or hell to pay. You think that maybe wasn't on their minds, considering they just don't want to die?
You know, I spent almost 40 years in the Middle East, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and South Asia. I am a realist. I've lived with these people, prayed with these people, drank with these guys, been in their diwans, heard them lie, cheat, steal, leverage, and tell the truth and pray. All of that bluster is just that to them. They know BS when they hear it. Will they claim that, oh, this is, the pressure from the Americans? America doesn't have the capacity to do anything, Donald Trump claims he says. To say we're going to destroy the Iranian oil fields is like saying, and we fully intend to collapse the US economy the next day. And we'll kill hundreds of US service members and thousands. We'll get 80 million people fighting us on a minute-to-minute basis. That sounds great when you're talking, like, we were kids shows like G.I. Joe, where you can blow up airplanes and no one dies, right? That's fantasy baseball. These people understand him for who he fundamentally is, which is a moron with money. And a moron with money, you let him talk. I mean, look, I've been to the camel souk, right? All over the Muslim world. First thing you don't do in the camel souk is try to buy a camel from the person selling it at a disadvantage to them. They know the camel, they know the market, they know you're an idiot that knows nothing about camels. But they will let you believe that everything you say is important and interesting and worthwhile, and they will screw you in the end. A thinking president like Joe Biden is one that might get nudged around at the edges, but he, often the people that work for him, the Blinkens and, the other experts, they understand how it's played. It's all a wink and a nod. But Donald Trump is doing this on a macro level. And what he doesn't understand is when he was laughed at the United Nations, they were sincerely laughing. This was not, a bon mot that he made and he had some amusement. But they will see what they can get out of him. If there's a dollar to be gotten out of the United States or China in the long term, look, China is playing long ball here. They are not,
They always play
genuflecting
long ball.
They're not genuflecting to America, right?
Right, Malcolm,
It
do you remember many years ago that what they did is they put together, I believe it was like a dozen of the top Chinese economists who came up with a manifesto on how to topple the US economy in under 10 years. And that's what they do. They're always thinking long ball because, for whatever the reason is, they know they can't succeed. Very little can actually be accomplished in a short period of time. You do need to stage things. Look at even the hostage return. It's not in one swoop. This is a phase in, a three-phase process. So that, in terms of to the hostages, is certainly a long-term thought process. I did want to ask you though, because Trump, over the course of his years now since 2016, has made comments which again suggest an incredibly hardline stance on Middle East negotiations. I mean, he's not been shy at all. You think with his return to the White House now, how do you think that his administration's position will influence or actually destabilize this ceasefire?
I think that there's a very, very good chance that the destabilization, when it comes, is going to come in synchronicity with something President Netanyahu himself may require. And Donald Trump's just the kind of guy to play, the boo-boo, the fool, to look like America is flexing its muscles and allowing Israel to move to a position of greater advantage that's in their interest. Now, Marco Rubio is not the sharpest tool in the shed. It's the people who are going to be under him, the true believers, the executors of Donald Trump's will, including National Security Advisor. They're the ones who are going to be working the deals. And each, how can I put it? Each speed bump that we hit is going to be designed to wring either money, concessions, or a combination of money and concessions out of people that already know the money and concession ask is coming. You cannot beat the Saudis at this game, right? The Saudis came literally from Bedouin encampments in the Hijaz in the 7th century, and it didn't change until T.E. Lawrence arrived. Okay, in World War One, and only then in the 1930s with the explosion of oil. And they understand you need them far more than they
But we
need
don't
you.
really need them anymore. We have more oil in America than Saudi. We have more oil. We have like 360 billion barrels of untapped oil in America. For the first time in our history, we are energy independent as it relates to oil. And moreover, we have now excess that we're exporting ourselves. So
Right.
Saudi technically is now a competitor.
Right. But I'm saying that we need them in the oil market for the stability that they provide. Look, China will buy up every drop of oil that they can get on that part of the world and expand their economy, which, as we know, advanced technologies are energy energy gluttons. You want to
Mhm.
build a Tesla factory, you better build 5 or 10 power plants or a nuclear power plant to support what you want to do in Guangdong, right? And if you want to expand China's economy, make sure that the quality of living is going on, people aren't freezing, you'll buy every drop of oil from Iran, you'll buy every drop of oil from Saudi Arabia, and you'll make sure that the market remains generally stable. And if it is necessary to send a shot across the bow of the United States, and I've been waiting for this for over 10 years. When I was living in the United Arab Emirates, I lived in Abu Dhabi for 10 years. There was talk almost weekly about changing the base currency from the dollar to the renminbi, or at one point there was a crazy talk about the ruble. But the renminbi, the Chinese currency, can actually act, if they are the adult in the global room,
Mm.
be a more, how can I put it, stable currency for the rest of the world. China's long ball is quite simple. They will let Donald Trump be the bull in the China shop but the China shop is American. And it is all made up of items and trinkets that are made in China that will have to be replaced by the Chinese. He wants to destroy the chip market and get rid of the chip act and make sure that the United States is buying only its microchips from Taiwan. And he thinks that he could set it up with Elon Musk in Bolivia or some other place. Hey, the Chinese will let us do that, and they will then invade Taiwan and and own the entire global chip market. I mean, we can't win if we are stupid about it. And unfortunately, stupid will take its oath of office at 12 noon on January 20th.
So, look, I want to talk about the people who Trump's transition team have nominated for these incredibly high positions. And I could take
Mhm.
hours to talk about all the various different people. But I want to begin with somebody who you've already mentioned, Marco Rubio, Secretary of
Right.
State. I want to talk about Tulsi Gabbard. I
Mhm.
want to talk about Pam Bondi. And of course, Pete Hegseth.
Hey, hey, one
Am I
disaster at a
feeling
time. Okay.
well, okay, sure. So, yeah, I mean, if these individuals are confirmed, and they are likely to be confirmed to these key positions in this administration, I want to go one by one, starting with Marco Rubio. The impact that their ideologies have on whether it's US foreign policy in the Middle East, its approach to diplomacy, and then we'll get to the other individuals because people put too much credence on the commander in chief. Yes, he is the big boss, but it's the individuals that ultimately, have to hold the line. Let's talk about Marco Rubio.
Yeah. I find that Marco Rubio's appointment to Secretary of State fascinating. And I find it fascinating in the Nikki Haley as Secretary of State mold. It's almost, I personally think that they nominated Rubio for two reasons. One, to give them a modest, moderate face on the Americans on the global stage. But I don't think that's why they nominated him. The principal reason was they wanted him out of that Florida Senate seat,
Yep.
and they want that, and they want a firebrand axe murderer in that seat so that the Senate will look exactly like the House of Representatives. None of this cooling saucer moderation thing. They needed to eliminate Rubio and all of his moderate positions, and they did it quite simply. Marco Rubio going to Foggy Bottom is not sending Jefferson to Paris, right? This is not Benjamin Franklin. This isn't even John Adams going to London, right? This is more along the lines. I can't remember what was the name of that Ronald Reagan movie with the monkey. So this is, oh yeah, Bedtime for Bongo, right? This is what
Exactly.
Marco Rubio is. He's the monkey. And he is intended to be the person who will clap and dance when Donald Trump winds him up and nothing else, on pain of being fired from the highest level job that he has. But his real job was getting the hell out of that Senate seat. And he will do it. He will be he will go to Davos, he will go to New York, he will go to, the G7, and he will pretend to be the cooling saucer, the man who understands and, how the United States Senate and Donald Trump works. But what he really will be is a wind up doll for Donald Trump. And then they're going to
Well,
put a firebrand in that job.
well, we already know. I mean, they Ron DeSantis nominated Attorney General Ashley Moody to
Right.
take that seat. What you think she's the firecracker that they were looking for? I do know that there was
I mean,
conversation that
this
Lara
is,
Trump was supposed to be
yeah, I
the
remember
senator.
Lara Trump. Yeah, well, this is the woman who replaced Pam Bondi as Attorney
Right.
General in Florida. Look, these people are MAGA. They're not Americans. They're MAGA. They are Trump loyalists. No one gets a job unless you swear fealty to him, you kiss his ring, you kiss his feet, and you bring him a cannoli, right? So that
He
is just the
doesn't. By
way
the
that
way,
it's going to be.
he doesn't like cannolis.
He doesn't like cannolis.
Now bring him a well done steak and a potato.
It's a kind of mafia don is this? All right, a half-eaten Big Mac, whatever. My point is that his nominees, people that he is not looking at individuals. MAGA has figured out after the disaster of his first term that you have to have a conga line of true believers who will be in a row to bat for you and to further not just you but to honor your name. This is straight up Kim Jong Un stuff. But Marco Rubio is the yellow smiley face on the picture of the Trump administration's.
And what about Tulsi Gabbard?
Yeah,
Give my listeners your impression on this one.
You're just trying to piss me off, right? That's why you asked. Okay.
I mean, this is one that's got to hit home to you.
This reminds me of one of my favorite lines in the musical Hamilton, where they're having the rap battle between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. And one of my favorite lines is, "You've got to be out of your goddamn mind," right? That's Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard, RFK and Kash Patel, you've got to be out of your mind to make this nomination. That woman is a threat to the national security of the United States. I say this as a lifelong intelligence professional. I have secrets in my head that I swore I would die for. This woman will sell those secrets. That's my opinion. My opinion is she has been an active, working, contrarian to the interests of the United States and the U.S. intelligence community. She got promoted as a psychological operations officer reservist, working at Fort Bragg, but what she really was she was a person who was working against America. This woman sided with a genocidaire who put chemical weapons 300 times against his own citizens, and the entirety of U.S. intelligence was verifying this. And listen, we don't just go down there and say, "Oh, MiG-21 took off from this base. He's dropping special bombs like he's been doing all week." We go get the chemicals. We don't say they're dropping mustard gas if we don't have mustard gas samples in our hands. This woman will screw us. She will destroy the intelligence apparatus. Here's the first way she's going to do it. She's going to do it because everyone's going to effing quit. No one wants to work for a nut, and no one wants to work for a potential traitor who will turn into, who will turn the U.S. intelligence apparatus into an extension of the Gestapo. That's what I think. That's my opinion. But what do I know? I've only been doing this job my whole life. This woman, I don't think she has any of the interests of the United States. And she comes from a freaking cult in Hawaii that is more closely aligned with India than it is to America.
And I do want to remind my listeners that she's tapped to be the next director of national intelligence, which is why Malcolm's blood pressure has now basically escalated to a whopping 190 over probably 100. Who knows? I mean, it's a little bit dangerous. So
I'm in the 200s already. No.
So, well, look, let me then move on to dear old Pete Hegseth for our, secretary to the Department of Defense, a roughly $900 billion agency with 4 million people involved?
I'm trying to find my moment of zen, a point of zen in this conversation, and you are just ruining it. Listen, Pete Hegseth, this is okay. I spent 20 years of my life in the armed forces of the United States. The Nance family has spent the last 152 years continuously in the service of the United States since the Civil War, Indian War, Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, and right up till my niece, who just retired from the Navy just recently. Let me say this. You don't give this job to a drunk frat boy. And that's what Pete Hegseth is. He was a low-grade officer in the National Guard, not the regular army, the National Guard. No offense to them. They have been deploying like they were the regular army. He volunteered to go out with an army unit as a National Guard officer. And he went out there and he served as a platoon commander. He commanded 40 men and $10 million worth of night vision rifles, ammunition. And guess what? That wasn't even a command. That was a position under his battalion commander, who had a brigade commander, who had a division commander, who had a corps commander, who had a theater commander, who also had a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, right? Well, General Austin, who he replaces, was a theater level commander, multiple theaters of operations, who also, like Pete Hegseth, insulted everyone who ever served when he said, we need a we need a Secretary of Defense who has dust on his boots. General Austin won the Silver Star. It's the third highest valor award that we have. He commanded tens of thousands of troops in combat. He actually has read the books about how you do war and politics. We don't need to put a drunk, and that's what, hey, my opinion is based on this. Everyone reports that the man's a drunk. Jane Mayer just wrote an article where someone went out to breakfast with him. Breakfast, and he had 3 gin and tonics, and it wasn't a Sunday. Okay? He had a bar in his Fox News office. He was visibly drunk and was drinking on air. I was a contributor at MSNBC for 7 years. Not once did I even think it was possible to go near a television monitor, even as I'm speaking to you, with alcohol in me. Because you may say something intemperate, you may say something wrong, you may say something insulting, and you may speak your actual truth. Like when he stood up and shouted at a bar, I want to kill Muslims.
As I get older, New Year's to me means different things. Like as a kid, it was party time. Now, it's an opportunity to reflect and to plan for the future. Like furthering career goals or making financial moves. And most importantly, ensuring that my family is always taken care of, no matter what happens. So make this year the year that you check, for example, life insurance off your list and protect your family's future with Policy Genius. Policy Genius makes finding and buying life insurance simple so that you can ensure that your loved ones have a financial safety net to cover debt and routine expenses, or even invest that money to earn interest over time if, God forbid, something happens to you. So with Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just a mere $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. And some options are 100% online, and that lets you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Look, when I was 25, I purchased a whole life insurance policy, and it was very inexpensive. And I thought that the coverage would be enough. Now, as my family has grown and my debts have increased, it's not. It's not if, God forbid, something would have happened to me. So whether it's to cover mortgage payments, car loans, your child's education, or even for burial expenses, this would all be covered by life insurance. So when you have life insurance, you feel protected. And you know what? So does your loved ones. Now, many people believe that obtaining life insurance is difficult and time-consuming. Not with Policy Genius. Nope. Policy Genius combines digital tools with the expertise of real licensed agents. And it lets you compare quotes from America's top insurers side by side for free with no hidden fees. Their licensed support teams, they help you get what you need and fast so that you can get on with your life. They answer questions, they handle the paperwork, and they advocate for you throughout the entire process. So the bottom line, life insurance is a form of financial planning, and Policy Genius, it's the country's leading online insurance marketplace. And even if you already have life insurance through work, it may not protect all your family's needs, or it may not even follow you if you leave the job. So join thousands of happy Policy Genius customers who left 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot. So secure your families tomorrow so you have peace of mind today. Head right now to policygenius.com/Michael or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/Michael. Go now.
Okay? This cannot be the Secretary of Defense of the United States of America. And he says he's going into acts, woke generals. You know what woke is? Woke is, and I said this just yesterday on a podcast. Woke is the speech given by former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and General Norman, not chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the former commander in Desert Storm, Norman Schwarzkopf, who went to West Point and said, "Where are our great leaders? Where are our MacArthurs? Where are our Eisenhowers? They're right here." A great leader has two characteristics. Two, they have to have character, and character means, and they have to have integrity. They have to have loyalty. They have to have fidelity. They have to have honor. They have to have a love of the Constitution and the norms in which they came from. And the second characteristic that they needed was competence. They needed to be the best at what they did. Let me tell you something. Dwight Eisenhower, before he was Supreme Allied Commander in World War II, served in World War I. Harry Truman was an officer who served in World War I. Richard Nixon served in logistics in World War II. Pete Hegseth was a platoon commander. He wasn't Audie Murphy, all right, the most decorated platoon commander in World War II, won the Medal of Honor and every award multiple times. Not at all. He had no integrity. He cheated on his wife, and he cheated on his girlfriend, and he cheated on his second wife, and then he was credibly charged with a rape allegation that he covered up with a non-disclosure agreement. This he just testified.
Wait, I'm so sorry. Wait, are you talking about Pete Hegseth? You're talking about the incoming president, right?
I can't tell the difference because apparently on your background check, it's a requirement.
Hey, can I ask you a question? Would
Oh,
I
geez.
be somebody that could potentially be the Secretary of the Department of Defense? I mean, I was in the Boy Scout for 4 days, and I certainly remember my Scout oath of, on my honor, I'll do my best to do my duty to God and my country, to obey the Scout law, to help other people at all times, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. I mean, does that now give me the ability within which to be the Secretary of the Department of Defense? I happen to be competent with a budget. That nobody will argue with.
Well, I have two more comments to make about that. Number one, that you remember and understand the Boy Scout oath disqualifies you from any position in the Trump White House.
Dude, I
Because
sold.
those
Let me be
values-
very clear, and my mom and my dad will acknowledge this. When I was there for that 1 week, was about a little less than a week. You know how I got tossed out is because I saw these guys walking in there, had all these medals on them, and I liked the way it looked. So I went out, and I was like maybe 10 years old. I bought all the medals from a store. I had my mom sew them onto the jacket. I walked in like a 12-star general, right? And they were like, what the fuck? This guy's in for like 7. But you know what I did do? I sold more light bulbs than any other scout. In fact, I sold more light bulbs, which I don't know why it was light bulbs that we were selling. Normally it would be chocolate and shit like that. It was light bulbs, but I sold more light bulbs than the entire division combined.
Well, one of them qualifies you, the other disqualifies you, and your personal shows of integrity are too much. And the only way that you could get a job in the administration is if you completely flip back to your previous alter ego and you become a total suck up toady to Donald Trump. He might, let you become help the Navy chiefs down in the White House cafeteria or something like that. So he could say he has. Listen to me. I was going to say, so he could say he has a felon in the White House. He has multiple felons in the White House. So no, you're not qualified. But Pete Hegseth, help us, Jesus. Everyone appeal to Yahweh. This cannot happen. That man is a danger. He is a literal drunk frat boy that they want to put in charge of. Listen, the two nonprofits that he ran into the ground, the purpose of those nonprofits was to advocate for privatizing veteran and military health care. Can you believe this? No, no, not qualified. Our allies will ignore him. They will look for sanity at some level below. Maybe that billionaire that he appointed as Deputy Secretary of Defense, which is really a way of channeling funds to Lockheed Martin and getting money kicked back to the White House. But Pete Hegseth, he just ain't it.
Hey, let me ask you this then. Will it lower your blood pressure if we talk about Pam Bondi, or should I move on to a totally different scenario? You think Pam Bondi is qualified for it? I mean, on paper, she's certainly qualified. I was less than ecstatic with some of the responses that she had given, not even to just be able to acknowledge. And I understand the conundrum that Pam Bondi is in when constantly asked again and again and again and again whether or not Donald Trump lost the election in 2020. And she refused to answer that question. In fact, all she would do is say, Joe Biden is the president of the United States. It's
Right.
not the same thing, but I understand exactly why, because this is a sore subject for Donald. It most certainly is. And the last thing you want to do, as you are now being nominated, and you know every one of these four people that I'm referring to will all be confirmed for their position. Make no bones about it, they will.
I don't think
Pam
Tulsi
Bondi.
Gabbard. I don't think Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr.
I
will
do.
be confirmed.
I do.
If Tulsi
Well,
Gabbard's
let's.
confirmed, then you've just ended U.S. intelligence. I mean, literally. Remember when we talked about China playing long ball a
Yep.
little while ago? Here's Chinese long ball. Let's watch the Americans destroy themselves. Let's go get dim sum. So, and we're going to do a good job if that happens. But Pam Bondi, look, in terms of the nominees, she's right up there with Marco Rubio. Donald Trump wants someone who is going to be the executor, who's going to take the law and manipulate the law for him. That was going to happen no matter who's in that job. She is technically qualified for the job.
Mhm.
That's the big difference is that. We also know that she has no integrity because she took a $25,000, apparently, according to the news, in my opinion, that $25,000 payoff and taking, stopping the investigation of Donald Trump and joining other states is very, very shady. In any other place in the world, there'd be a special counsel. She would have been investigated. The Trump administration will go down in shame.
I think
She's going to be his
$5,000.
executive.
I think 5,000 of that 25 was from me.
Was it?
I think so.
Yeah.
Donald told me to write a check. I wrote a check.
Brother, you need to start paying up because it's not going to help us, you or me.
No. Yeah, you're right about that.
But can I point something out? If you ever watched the movie Judgment at Nuremberg with Spencer Tracy, great film about prosecuting Nazis in World War II, Burt Lancaster actually plays the Supreme Court justice who headed the Nazi Supreme Court, and one of the other Nazi officers was their attorney general, the prosecutor general, and they were charged with changing the laws to commit genocide and make mass murder legal. And this is the problem. I fear that the Trump administration is going to use the laws to turn America into what I wrote in my book, The Plot to Destroy Democracy, into a constitutional autocracy. That means it's an autocracy for his enemies, and it's a constitution, the Constitution will be a pick and choose thing for his allies. One question she was asked, the one that upset me the most, was when they asked her, was birthright citizenship constitutional? It's in the Constitution. And she says, I have to study that. Really? You have to study that? I studied it in junior high school, which tells me she's either a liar who has been asked that, who has been brought in and made privy to possibly during the transition plans to end not just end birthright citizen, to violate the literal written law of the United States and throw the Constitution out on its ear on that point. And she is just settling into the idea that she has to do it.
Yeah. So, Malcolm, look, the hour, as I said at the beginning, it's going to go by very quickly, and so it has. My last question for you. So, what do you think Americans should be prepared for?
I'm writing a Substack about this.
Well,
I
tell
think we need
everybody
to,
I want to read it. I love your
yeah,
Substacks.
at malcolmnance.substack.com, my special intelligence Substack. Unfortunately, we are going to have to be prepared for chaos. And here's the thing that I fear the most, not for myself. I'm from Philadelphia. I don't give two fucks. All right. You come at me, we're going to have it. We're going to have it out. Okay. I've had the Attorney General of the United States have me pulled off air at MSNBC.
Yeah, I had
I
the
have people,
attorney
I have death
general. I had the attorney general unconstitutionally remand me and put me
send
back
you
into
to
solitary
jail.
confinement for 51 days. Right?
Yeah, the reason I felt so protected is that there were cheesesteaks between me and getting me sent to prison, right? So when the people come to Philly, they get sidelined. You were in New York City, they just throw your ass in jail. So I think that people need to understand that we are going to go into the most chaotic period in American history, and I say American history for this reason. In the run up to the Civil War, the southern states and the states that wanted secession actually had an intellectual and a constitutional argument that they could use the same means to remove themselves from the United States on the basis of states' rights, even though it was bullshit. The states' right was to enslave people and live off the wages of, thraldom, of slavery. I don't think we're getting any of that. We are going into a fascist autocracy. And I wrote about it. I wrote this book about it 6 years ago, where I called it the United States is going to join Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, Turkey, Saudi Arabia in an axis of autocrats. And it's not just oligarchy, it's oligarchy that controls all the major poles in the world for the reason to gain money, which means American democracy has to go out the window. It cannot stand against oligarchy. It cannot stand against Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg putting all of their power into buying the mindset of 90 million Americans so that those 90 million that didn't vote will never vote again, and that the 76 million that voted for Kamala Harris will be so dispirited that they will be oppressed by the 77 million that voted for Donald Trump. I think they are going to rule over us. There will be no governing going on. This will just be chaos and mayhem. And as I wrote in my last book, they want to kill Americans. We're going to see whether this descends into violence. And at this point, the way that they're talking about punishing people, getting rid of 300,000 civil servants, there's going to be violence out of this. And I think they look forward to that. I have been one of the few people on the influencer, now left, by the way, I was conservative most of my life, who has said, we will not have massive protests because they want to crush a massive protest with violence using the army, the police, and there are enough people out there that will kill for Donald Trump. We have to be smarter about this. We have to remove ourselves and strategically insert information that is lethal to Donald Trump. That is the truth at strategic times where the other 90 million people are paying attention. And that ain't on Facebook and it ain't on TikTok.
Nope. And it ain't going to be on MSNBC or CNN either, my brother.
No,
Anyway, Malcolm,
no.
Malcolm, thank you, my friend. It'll be on independent shows like this, like Mea Culpa, Midas
Absolutely.
Touch Network, and so on. Malcolm, thank you, my friend, for joining me. As always, appreciate you. Appreciate your insight, your intelligence, and your honesty.
Well, let's see how good that does us, right?
Yeah,
We'll hang
exactly.
together or we'll all hang separately.
There you go. Thank you, my friend.